Hello, it's October 2nd, 2016. I'm Tony Smario here at BroSal.org YouTube channel, and welcome to World War III this week. And I think one of the major things we have to talk about, I've been pointing out now that money's driving a lot of this conflict naturally, because money is what makes the world go round. And so this collapse that everyone's expecting of the U.S. dollar that I keep saying won't happen. It's not going to happen till the very end. But at the same time, this war that's being set up has to have pressure pushing on it from both sides to keep each side escalating their need to respond to the other. And I say that pressure's got to be looked at as economic pressures, because that's what nobody can do without until the food and air and water run out, like the old Indian saying. Only one of the last fish has been caught, and only one of the last rivers been poisoned, and only then will man realize that money can't be eaten. And so, we're sort of fulfilling that prophecy in a way as well, or that proverb. So I'm looking this week because they just included the yuan, the RMD they call it, the renminbi, in the basket of international currencies for the special drawing rights, where countries' banks are able to draw from them in emergency money that doesn't otherwise exist. And without getting into the whole financial stuff, because there's really good commentators on the alternative media, if you sift through, if you keep in mind, it's all a wag the dog world, and a lot of the financial guys I listen to, they still look at it as these things are happening only on the surface. But I heard one tonight say it's just unexplainable, because the reason it's unexplainable or looks that way is because to somebody it is explainable. Somebody's got to pull in a string, because what do we think? These paid politicians or accountants or bankers, they're driving the whole world upside down and nobody can help it? No, somebody's driving the world upside down on purpose. And so what I find very telling right now is how this move to include the yuan in the SDRs puts China in of course, much stronger position than it was before the inclusion. It's being led up to, it has been led up to this past couple of years, as far as I can tell, with China being the largest buyer of these special drawing rights, purchasing them as an investment, and gold. The largest buyer of both SDRs and gold has been China. And what are they buying them with but their U.S. dollars? And meanwhile, the U.S. dollar remains strong, but this whole move demonstrates it can't be as strong now or tomorrow as it was yesterday, because this yuan is now in the basket and will take away some of the dollar's dominance, and the fact that China's spending all their dollars on more valuable things. So, as I say, not trying to get into the financial discussion any further than the surface level of here's what's taking place and the players that are involved. As far as what I can tell, is the fallout of it is that the dollar gets weaker. China's in a stronger place, and their currency is in a stronger place. Meanwhile, the whole world seems to be threatening, we, America at least, NATO, threatening that, China's out of control in the South China Sea. And so it's an odd combination of moments, as I say, like I've never seen before, where we're worried about Russian aggression, and they want to, we can't trust them. They're helping the guy we're trying to get out of there. So all this death and destruction. And I notice people aren't talking as much about the, 250,000 people killed so far. Remember, it was that number for like a year. The Syrian war that's killed approximately 250,000 people. I mean, they haven't stopped. Where's the number today? And that was before Russia even started bombing. So, and now, of course, Russia and the USA, where we can't agree on these truce measures. They just won't stop helping Assad, and we just won't stop pushing with ISIS. As I say, I have to beg you to look at the idea that what you've got is a wag the dog situation where ISIS was sent in there not to take out Assad regime. They can do that. They don't have a problem doing that when they want to do that. They're in there to get this long stalemate war. We've been in Afghanistan 15 years, Iraq, practically the same. In other words, they're doing something there. That many years ago, when I first started sailing south, I met a young man and his wife. They worked in Iraq, part of the U.S. military. He was there in construction working on one of the largest military bases in the world, and the largest one in the Middle East, in Iraq. And this was, when did I leave? 2006 or 7? This is almost 10 years ago. What was that largest? Did they know something? Did they know they were going to need a really large military presence for a long time in Iraq and spend the money to go down there and build a U.S. military base that's one of the largest bases that we have anywhere in the world? Why would you do that in a world where you're trying to stay out of their business, have peace? All you want is the Israelis and Palestinians and, stop fighting over that land. That's all this was supposed to be about. Now you got this complete destabilization and uprooting, to borrow Daniel's terminology, of these various kingdoms in that region, from Egypt, which is no longer what it was, Libya, which is something utterly different, Iraq, Afghanistan. Now the tension between Pakistan and India is erupting, but the pressure point there. And because Pakistan's a nuclear power, and India, you have this tremendous potential for, what I'm always talking about is reality, the depopulation agenda and the Great War kind of scene, even if it's not nuclear weapons, even if most of that has just been hype like the Cold War. And it's really just a lot of people killing each other, dropping bombs on each other like they do now. Look what's going on in Yemen. Look what's going on in Afghanistan and Iraq. Look what we've turned Iraq into in 15 years. Look at what Syria's been turned into in 5 or 6 years now. So it could be, Nostradamus said 25 years was going to be this final war. So, put some perspective on what's going on here. As I'm trying to say, these are the seeds, the wars and rumors of wars. Don't be alarmed. The time is not yet. And more, I think, to reconcile that is that things have to get close. There has to be battles. There has to be such tension. The world has to be at such a point that only, we're on the brink of all-out war. And then that get pulled back for this 7-year covenant to rebuild the temple, if that's the way the eschatology is properly interpreted. Sheikh Imran Hossein, who's my favorite teacher of anything religious I've ever seen in my life, he seems to understand his methodology, his Quran, his prophecies. I don't agree with everything. Even as I've learned his own interpretation of his own Quran, I think he misses a couple things, as we all do. But I really, really appreciate the depth of his eschatological knowledge of his prophecies. And the way he sees it coming about is the Great War happens first, which makes, because of a very specific prophecy that they have that said when Jerusalem is rising, Medina will be in ruins. And when Medina is in ruins, the great war will come at the conquest of Constantinople. And after the conquest of Constantinople, Dajjal, the false Messiah, will arrive in human form. So in that sequence of events, he's looking for the great war any moment. That's why he sees all this provocation as not stopping for a 7-year covenant to rebuild the temple, but the great war first, and then he says only after this great war, and this is where he and I see very much the same thing. What I've been saying is that you can't build this temple and think you're going to have people worship Lucifer. You're going to stop the Jews, and you're going to say, no, we built this other monument here on it, and look, what's called the false prophet's going to make it speak, and everybody's going to worship this thing and take its mark. That you can't do that. As Sheikh Hossein says, in sort of a different facet, but we agree on this point, the Orthodox Christians and the true believing Muslims aren't going to stand for this sort of Messiah that's introducing Lucifer essentially to the world, the light to the world, however they choose to, who knows how Lucifer is going to present himself, the Messiah. I am the Messiah. This is the way Sheikh Imran Hossein sees it. And because the intent is that they will rule the world from Jerusalem forever. No more competition. And that's the nature behind all this one world government idea. But the truth is, it's much deeper than that. It's a coming out of the closet of the true power to rule, what everybody in the circle calls God, whether Lucifer's God or Jesus is God or Allah is God, whichever. These are the people that are waiting for God to rule the world on that mountain. And so this is the play that somebody's making for that. At least, as I say, to bring the eschatological reality into it, because this is where Zionism plays its part. It comes in as this strategic piece coming from Europe and saying, we're Jews, we converted. And I learned something really interesting, as a parenthesis, from Sheikh Hossein recently. I have to agree at this moment, without further study, his view of Gog and Magog is that they're the converted Jews and Christians that come out of that Khazarian Empire that went into Europe, and some of those Jews became Christians, as the beginning of Christianity came from. It came from Jews. So it's very reasonable to think that this Khazarian Empire that converted to Judaism, then they went forth conquering into Europe. They brought with them that Judaism. Some of them turned into Christians, and that's why there always was that alliance. They've been allied even when they split from each other. They're still all from that bloodline, I suppose. Maybe that's where bloodlines come from. Just throwing that out there, because what you do, in fact, it really, for me, it fits quite well the expectation of Scripture that this Gog and Magog that will be released. And I won't go in right now to the Quranic version, which is remarkably synchronous with our own understanding of Gog and Magog. If you strip away all the traditional Christian crap, basically anything you've ever learned from Western Christianity about prophecy, stop thinking of it as Russia or Turkey. As I've been through the progression. First I thought Russia, then I thought Turkey, and now I realize, well, no, only Turkey in the sense that they're part of NATO, that Christian Jewish Zionist alliance. Not Jewish in the sense of true believing Jews waiting for their Messiah, that believe in the Mosaic covenant. God's going to satisfy them. He's going to show them who the true Messiah is. That's what Paul promised. That's what all the prophets promised. But these Jews who claim to be Jews but are not, they're using this covenant to set up their own temple and Messiah. They all happen to come from this Masonic secret societies. So I'm starting to say, Khazarian Empire becomes secret societies, becomes Illuminati, Masons, whatever. Maybe even part of these Vatican orders, most probably, since that's where all of Western Santa Claus Christianity comes from. Gregorian calendar, the whole antithesis, right, to the thesis, which is the true God. And same thing happened over in Islam. So anyway, I just want to set a little foundation today for discussing, where we're going and how we're getting in there, and why I'm always pointing out that the last 100 years are so important in understanding why this war is coming about and why everything you really read and see is sort of, wag the dog at best. That it's much more enlightening, informing to imagine that what's coming is a deep division along military lines that set many people up against each other simply for being associated to these ties. For instance, Russia, Iran, Syria, China, Russia, Iran, Syria. Pakistan, where are they going to go? So Saudi Arabia, everybody gets divided along these lines now and then you have these more swing places. And Sheikh Imran Hossein also sees Turkey now coming into the light and wondering, okay, the NATO, he sees the coup as a fraud, as I have to agree. If I had to bet, I don't know, of course, but if I had to bet, I would say, the coup was staged, because it's all wag the dog. And, he's one of these NATO-supported dictators. If he was really having trouble, man, with all the secret police and you don't think we kill the people that really threaten the regime? But see, it takes out that portion of the people that doesn't want to have their Muslim brothers and sisters slaughtered behind NATO. And that's what's coming right now. And I think that's what's going on with this, the quote-unquote Syria war, which is really a Sunni Shia divide where the Sunnis now are killing the Shias, taking positions and taking strongholds and taking land under this guise so the world can't tell. And I want to read, and I'm going to try and do a little different this week, Dad. I want to read one article and hope I have a little more time for some others, but I really want people to get into this wag the dog bull where you can't, there's no journalism. Everything is suggestive. It is psyops on everyone's mind. And those suggestions are coming all through alternative media everywhere. I'm telling you, you have to be very careful trusting the popular thing. You have to really have a basis for your understanding. And so if you imagine that this Zionism that some people are trying to resist, they know that what they want to do is extend from the Nile to the Euphrates, which is Iraq, and half of Syria. Just happens to be where they're fighting and pushing back, where ISIS, was controlling swaths of land. Just happens to be like that border area there where the Euphrates is. So, this is, what really seems to be going on. And Libya, as the Sheikh points out, needed to be taken out to make way for the NATO army to come from the south against Egypt, as Israel could come from the north. And that way Egypt, in the end, can be completely subdued. Whereas if they had recourse to Libya as a fellow Muslim state, it would be much harder to overtake them. So, when you get into a geopolitical perspective that makes some sense, what's going on beside all this reaction, hype. And, I've been flipping through a few things in which I've been looking back a little, watching stuff a year old, several months old, watching how nothing's happening as fast. The hype is still the same, right? Don't you remember the Iranian boats were attacking us just, last week? That was the big thing, right? It's hype. We don't know if any of this is any more than photos from drills or anything else, and then given certain stories. We just don't know. I've been saying it for a long time now. This war over here in Syria is not what you're being told. Sure, people are being killed, but even this pictures in this article that I want to go through are very suspicious to me. I mean, don't we go after such things as, communications, lines of their support, right? The communications places, transportation hubs, docks, and where you bring shipments in, where you house computers, and they're showing this city, Aleppo, that's the biggest city in Syria. They're saying 250,000 inhabitants. And they're showing the area in these maps, and who knows how much of it's even true, but the areas they show aren't in what you can see as the city center, where you have maybe your high rises or your office buildings. I don't know. I'm just wondering, because what they always show is just a lot of broken cement. Some of it to me looks quite possibly staged, easy to use, like Hollywood fixtures that are already in place, and just decorate them up any way you want. No real feeling to me. Again, I don't see that if things came in and bombed people's area, wouldn't there be cars that were just there accidentally? And I mean, where is the look of the carnage rather than just these skeletal cement buildings, which look like it could be almost anything? For instance, when you look at the Oklahoma City bombing that went off on a normal day with people all around, I mean, you got the cars all on the street there, and the part of the building, and the greenery of what was going on at the time. Do they show you a picture where the devastation ends and the nice neighborhoods start? I mean, do these Syrians in the biggest city in Syria, are they all poor dirt farmers that have never even seen a television or a cell phone? None of them have any footage. It's just not interesting at all that, that they're at war with the, Islamic State to try and keep their government intact, or with their neighbor over the issue. And there's not just all this, unavoidable collateral social media chatter about that encounter. I'm sorry, I don't see even the reality of that war. I see that something else is going on. Those areas look to me, if anything, Shia dominate. This is my guess. Okay, Shia dominated areas. They probably tell them, "Get the hell out. We're coming." Just like the Israelis will tell the Palestinians, "Okay, you guys are still lobbing bombs, so at 5:00 tomorrow we're bombing that building. Get out." And at 5:00 they bomb the building. So, and in these areas, people are fleeing. This is where a lot of these refugees are coming from, et cetera, et cetera. And they're leaving behind, nothing that they have to. You wouldn't leave your car there to get bombed. You'd pass it off to family in an area where it's not going to get bombed, wouldn't you? So I just find it really, something is wrong in my, when I look at it, it's like something doesn't feel right about it. The evidence doesn't seem to be there that's beyond a reasonable doubt. It all seems doubtful, or at least questionable. And then when I look at this whole wag the dog way they're presenting to me the sudden problem in America with, everything. If you pledge allegiance to the flag, if you don't have if you don't have I love pangender written across your forehead, you're offensive to people. You shouldn't say anything that's offensive. I mean, the country's just, it's so, right now, I really think people should just turn their darn TV off and go talk to their neighbor. Go see if none of it's even true. It's not even happening. They're creating it all. So, and of course, everybody, that's being sucked into it, they're creating momentum like a snowball with each of their manias. Like, I want to talk again this week about the election mania. Okay, but for now, what I want to do is point out that the deeper picture, is this division militarily, where you got NATO on one side, then you got the Russia, Iran, China, and that they both have nothing they can do but respond with more fighting. And until the Great War, there's finally, nobody can even hold back. Now it's a shoot, can we beat them? Look at how bad it's gotten. And again, so is the eschatology that there's a 7-year covenant first in which everybody goes, whew, that almost happened, but we pulled back and look at this. So that's why I say the only thing for me that makes it fit is this prophecy of the white horse king that comes out. He's going to be the good caliphate, because the Sunnis now, the Sunni Arabs that are on this rampage kind of right now, having to, they're supposedly being represented by ISIS, but that's BS. But they're on the rampage killing Shias and provoking this Shia response through Iran, Hezbollah, Iraq and all this stuff. And so it's this fight for territory that's going to eventually end in ISIS being defeated. The quote-unquote ISIS will be, erased like an electronic digit, taken off the screen. Oh, we defeated ISIS. But now what's going to fill the vacuum? All these radical military factions and splinter groups, I just give you the terminology probably here, vying for control. Who's going to, who do we, the West, put our money into? Who do we trust now? And that's when I say this whole Hashemite king can step forward and be the good caliphate and lead them, because he won't be doing it for himself and his gain in the beginning. He'll be doing it for the good of this peaceful world that almost went to, war, and everybody had to get against these guys, and he's now going to go out and start defeating the rest of the bad element in Islam. And that gives us this whole Christian eschatological perspective through Daniel, through the Judeo-Christian, if you will, through Daniel, about a 7-year covenant with many that's broken the middle, and the Revelation thing about the abomination spoken of in, Jesus telling the Jews when you see the abomination spoken of in Daniel, which then brings you to Revelation and this, the abomination of desolation. You're, as a Christian eschatologist, you're hooked into this Zionistic move to reestablish the temple and the Messiah coming again. The Quran sees that happening, but not till after the Great War, when they've devastated enough people that Israel can be ruling the world and the Messiah can step on the scene and say, I am the Messiah. But I think it's the Messiah that has to create the conditions under which they can rule the world. That's how he is the Messiah. So, that's where I differ with the Sheikh on that, and still imagine that what we know as Christians through our eschatology or Revelation, these two witnesses that will be, as terrorists to the world for 3.5 years. What are they doing? What are they saying? I think they must be saying, that temple, don't rebuild that temple. That's going to bring the wrath of God. Don't rebuild that temple, Jews. Don't think worshiping, you're following the synagogue of Satan, or, whatever terminology. It's going to be spoken of in that manner. And they have, it says, the power to bring plagues on people and, shut up the heavens so it doesn't rain. So they're going to be disrupting the earth and even plaguing people, apparently. And so they're going to be called terrorists, and they're going to try and kill them. And our scripture says they won't be killed until after their 3.5 years. So, just like Sheikh is trying to interpret all of his very mysterious and mystical perspectives on the eschatological view, so am I from the Revelation point of view and Daniel and such. And so I'm imagining that we could be leading to that time when we take this 7-year break from it that almost gets pushed over the edge. That's why Jesus could say, when you see the wars and rumors of wars, don't be alarmed. The end is not yet, because they're going to pull back from it. And for 3.5 years, you're going to have the last two witnesses saying, don't build that temple. So that's like the last warning. I figured it goes on for 3.5 years. There's ample time for people like me and the Sheikh to acknowledge that, or be, part of that voice. And so, and then it's at the midpoint of this 7-year covenant that the sacrifices stop. And so anyway, without going deeper into the eschatological view today now, I'm just trying to give some background for how this war's being set up, so that at some point there is a World War III about it. So whether it's before they rebuild the temple or because of the abomination of desolation, they rebuild the temple and halfway through it, they stop the sacrifice, and that starts the fight with Israel. And of course now NATO, America has to come in to protect Israel. And by then, we're supposing this whole 3.5 years of Sunni caliphate, if you will, the white horse king, whoever that is, I keep calling him the good caliphate, that will follow ISIS to organize the Sunnis into another end-time prophecy, right, of like the 10-toed kingdom that will give their power to the beast for such a short time, to the beast kingdom. You know, we're speaking of a kingdom now, a power, NATO. Think of NATO as the beast. That's probably what we're talking about. Gog and Magog is like, you know, the Zionist Christian alliance. You know, the beast is like the NATO countries. You know, that's what's really happening in our time as a backdrop for how it gets to this World War III. Again, if you want to cross over into the eschatological view, if you want to stay just on the geopolitical view, as you know, you've got these, you know, Orthodox Christians of Russia against the Zionist Christians of NATO, sort of thing. You got the Eastern mind of China, the long-term thinking, the, you know, the whole new monetary alliance and this and that against the Western mind philosophically and the capitalist, you know, world, right? The communist ideology of everybody just being one and sharing everything because we're all one, to the capitalist idea of private property and everything being individual, right? The trade restricted world of communism and Russia and such against the trade unrestricted world and the financial. So everything is a division into these two forces which have attained this kind of parity. U.S. and their allies, NATO, against China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, Brazil, right? Imagine when everybody's having to go against the proxy on the other side. Korea's going against each other, China having to defend North Korea, so now we're fighting China over there. Imagine all the people that are going to get killed when you got all China's bombs dropping on Korea. So, and that's part of our news this week, in the news this week, is the way U.S. will pay price for THAAD deployment, Beijing mouthpiece People's Daily says. This is CNBC, Reuters with CNBC from yesterday. So, you know, the rhetoric already being presented to us, so we know this is what's going to happen. You know, nobody talking about peaceful, nobody talking about, hey, we don't want to kill anybody, we're all friends, we got to work together. China, you know, has all the factories, they're dumping all the money right now. There's an interesting shift of, you know, to just parenthesis back to what we talked about earlier, there's an interesting shift of resources, you know, wealth right now through China. When you talk about enemies, you know, as I'm always trying to say, who set up Russia? Who paid for that Bolshevik revolution? Who's paid for them to get all this armament again? And, you know, who's staging all this? And same thing with China, you know. I think it's only important to see that China's got all the factories over there now. They were once, you know, America for like 50 years was the largest economy in the world. And we produced there. I remember even when I was a kid, if it said made in China, okay, it was plastic junk. You know, it was just something, it was something to give 3-year-olds at their birthday party or something. But that's it. It's something to get in a gumball machine. Plastic junk. That's all it was when I was a kid. Made in China meant plastic junk. Now here we are, 45, 50 years later since my childhood. And, you know, made in America is practically, you know, there's only a few things that have any sort of designation that way now. Think of the size of the economy based on the true, American manufacturing, not including weapons. All right, let's not include weapons. Maybe we make some planes, right? People like Boeing, their factories, but for the most part, we used to make everything. We had this huge economy for manufacturing. Well, all those factories are in China. Those people are trained. As that technological advance was put in place, it was put in place over there. It's their machines that have all the digital cutout things to make clothing, to make, whatever. Not us in America. And I say this is all, for me, a sign of the depopulation and where it's coming the heaviest, where the big destruction's going to take place. I think you got to start seeing it's going to be in the United States of America. That's where you got all the people that have this claim to a Christian life. A lot of them are waiting for Jesus in America, duped or not, brainwashed or not. They're still waiting for Jesus, God bless them. And so, they're not the favorites of the people who want to rule the world. So anyway, I want to move on because I want to try and get to the article today. So, China's saying U.S. will pay price for putting that THAAD missile defense system over in South Korea and upping the ante. And yeah, we will pay the price because they'll probably bomb they'll kill more South Koreans. I doubt anyone in the United States of America. Yet, isn't it planting the seeds for when they wag the dog and turn off the computers and say, China did it in response to the THAAD system? Do you see how the way they play that game? Do you see how that works? China responds with, hacking America's computers. And how far does that have to go to saying, interrupts Pentagon and, allows strategic missile defense system to be blown up here or there. You can press any button you want. Once you have me believing that you have a real enemy with a real struggle, and that we both have the motive and the capability. That's what you got to realize, that ultimately, when you're setting up this war of parity, this left and right, this, I don't know what you want to call the Russian alliance. They call them sometimes the anti-hegemony, but they're just as hegemonic. The whole thing's hegemonic. It's a red team, blue team. So we'll call them the red team, being Russia and their people. NATO's the blue team. And you're going to set up this war. Everybody involved has to have a motive and some measured capability. Otherwise, as we had the power to do right after World War II and set about in our think tanks, on the surface level of people who are thinking about it, what should we do? How do you keep control now? What do you do? We don't want to drop any more atom bombs. We don't want a world like that. What do we do to have a nice, peaceful world? What'd they come back with? Well, nothing. You got to keep the world in fear and at war. Right? That's really what sort of the psychological analysis of it became. Well, you let everybody just be free, do whatever they want. Well, they might not buy your stuff. They might not buy your political system. They might not buy your financial system. What if they don't want to borrow money from the World Bank? How are you going to keep pressure on other places? So war was the only answer, and so to do that, how are you going to keep the war going? Well, everybody's got to be capable of fighting. So this military buildup, this more and more weapons contractors, more and more technology going to weapons instead of truly, healthcare, education, communication. Yeah, out of the weapons R&D comes these other industries, after the whole purpose of their serving the weapons, industry is fully fleshed out, of course. But then after that, you've got trickle down into real life where they can make money and use it for whatever benefit they might have. And so here we are, with this parity suddenly, these two sides, and now the Philippines ready to join. They're ready to call Russia. They're so PO'd at the U.S. So I have to think, okay, that's all staged. I mean, what's see why? Because the Philippines can't gather no real popular resistance that could threaten anybody. He could say the most popular thing in the world. He could have every single Filipino on the island jumping up and down and locked in arms together. They're not going to stop anybody. So they can be really outraged and say all sorts of outrageous things and even be in a position now to turn that outrage toward siding their people with Russia, and it just becomes one more, hot spot in this whole push. One more war and rumor of war, right? So, Chinese military advisor says Singapore should pay the price in South China Sea spat. I don't want to spend any time on that. That's just one more, showing you this division. That's what's so important to get straight, is all the division. How one of the world's most advanced missile defense system works in one graphic. They're showing you the THAAD. And what's so funny is they've already demonstrated to us how a nuclear weapon blown up over 2 miles high or whatever would render anything electronic useless. Well, how do we send the information to these THAADs and such? Can't you imagine a world in which, we're all set up and yet, darn it, it's the whole we didn't expect that, even though they keep telling us. We're going to have something, the biggest 9/11, something way bigger than 9/11. And they've been saying that, prepping us for a long time, that something big's coming. So I don't know, but it's another way, I say, to push us. If you don't think you can just be pushed from here into a more aggressive war with China and stuff, really, really sending more weapons and fighting, and they can escalate it very quickly. And so I say we're still planting all the seeds of that. If I'm wrong and Sheikh Hussein is correct, then the war's coming much sooner, and the agreement to build the temple will be following the war. And as I say, that fits my depopulation idea. It'd be a heck of a lot easier for them to get away with building this temple if there's less people in the world. But it doesn't fit the idea of Daniel and the agreement. I suppose it does, but not with Armageddon coming before all that. Anyway, it's quite possible. I don't understand the placement of Armageddon, or it's been misunderstood and passed on to me for a long time as one of the deceptions. It's easy to watch the scene unfold and see where the pressure points are and who's trying to do what. If you're standing back far enough as I am, watching it with an eye toward these eventual goals of depopulation and a third temple and a Messiah that's going to come and rule the world from Jerusalem, and this whole Zionistic experiment, in their eyes, being the expression of how they're going to move into this new phase, even though the Zionists themselves seem, if our scripture is correct, they're being taken for a ride, right? Because halfway through the 7-year covenant, he breaks the deal, and everybody's got to worship this other image that's a blasphemy to the Jews. So the Jews are being led, the Zionists are being led to believe it's all about something that it's not either, perhaps, is what I have to think. So I kind of am going longer than I wanted to, but I'm just going to read a few paragraphs of this. Syria's Army of Islam says it wants no war with Israel. There was a time when you could count on hardcore Sunni Islamists in the Middle East to be reliably opposed to the existence of the Jewish state. Organizations ranging from the Muslim Brotherhood to Al-Qaeda disagreed on everything from jurisprudence to short-term strategy, but when it came to Israel, there was consensus. The slaughter in Syria is changing that. Take, for example, Jaish al-Islam, a Syrian coalition of rebels whose name translates conveniently to Army of Islam. Mohammed Aloush, the political leader of the group, Wednesday told me his fighters did not seek war with Israel. We have no intention to make war against anyone except for the Syrian regime, he said. If we compare all the killing in the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Syrian regime has committed many more crimes than the whole conflict. Our aim now is to get rid of the Syrian regime, he said. Alouche went further. He said President Bashar al-Assad and Hezbollah, the Iran-supported Lebanese militia backing the Syrian government, have exploited the issue of Palestinians to support their war. The regime and Hezbollah use the Israeli conflict to recruit supporters and build armies, and all these armies are used to kill us, to starve us. So anyway, this is a real pro, U.S. propaganda piece in which these good Sunni Islamists, they're terrorists, but they just want Assad out of there for the most part. They don't want Israel, you know what I mean? They just want Assad gone because this, you have this whole, there's a lot of truth, you guys. Sunni, Shia, they've been killing each other. We've been paying them to be killing each other for a long time, right? This rift is all part of it. And so, I was going to read more of this article, but I encourage people. It's from Bloomberg View, September 29th. Syria's Army of Islam says it wants no war with Israel. And so the point is, there's these, I'm saying this is all paving the way for this good caliphate to come. There's people that don't want war with Israel. It's like, wait, not every warrior for Islam wants war with Israel. That's the message. So anyway, thanks for being here, you guys. I hope it's helping you on this understanding of the march toward World War III. We'll talk to you next week.